Revenge with Karen.
The day it all began, the coffee was burnt, and the sky looked like wet concrete. Elizabeth stood in line at the cafe near the office, the same cafe she'd visited every morning for 7 years. She handed over her usual $5 tip to Joe, the elderly waiter with shaky hands and eyes that had seen too much, and he gave her that soft, grateful nod like always. She didn't even think about it anymore. Habit. Like breathing, like fixing other people's messes at work without a thank you, like being the invisible engine under someone else's trophy car. Back then, the company felt like a machine with too many drivers and not enough grease. Elizabeth was the grease. Every product, every feature, every brilliant tech reveal during company town halls, somewhere behind the curtain, she'd written the code, diagrammed the system, or solved the bottleneck at 2 a.m. while everyone else was home pretending their stock options meant something. But she never chased spotlights. She didn't schmooze with VPs at strategy offsites. Her idea of power was working hardware and bug-free firmware, not golf retreats and fake LinkedIn humility. She figured, if she kept delivering, someone would eventually see it. That's the thing about being indispensable until you're not. That morning, Elizabeth had already been chewing on something off. A draft patent renewal landed in her inbox late the night before. Normal protocol. They'd filed it under R&D team composite filing, no surprise there. But when she checked the embedded metadata, something itched. Her name wasn't listed at all, not even in the digital trail, not as an inventor, not as a contributor. She wasn't new to office politics, but this felt surgical. She pinged legal. Friendly tone, casual phrasing. Hey, quick question. Noticed I wasn't on the renewal for System ID 2079. Oversight? 3 hours later, the reply came. Hi, Elizabeth, thanks for flagging. The renewal was submitted with the current team leads. I'll double-check, but we followed the standard process, which was code for, we've already deleted you from the narrative, sweetheart. She forwarded the thread to her personal inbox. Just in case. That was the 4th time this quarter. Not that she was keeping score, but she was. Quietly. A war journal written in forwarded emails, Slack exports, and NDA footnotes. You don't get to work in R&D for over a decade without growing a second brain for paranoia. Still, she told herself it was probably nothing. Maybe the junior paralegal forgot to pull from the full draft list. Maybe the CTO was just trimming attribution to avoid splitting credit 5 ways. Maybe. And maybe that's why she tipped Joe every single day without fail. Because in a world full of people pocketing what they didn't earn, she figured small kindnesses were the only form of honest currency left. By the way, if you've made it this far and you're not subscribed yet, I've got 2 things to say. 1, you've got great taste in stories. 2, hitting that subscribe button and giving this a like helps more than you know. No pressure, but the team here survives on coffee, caffeine, and chaos, and your support keeps all 3 brewing. Back at the office, Elizabeth stepped into the elevator, badge on autopilot, and tried not to let her expression show what she was already starting to suspect. That something, somewhere, had shifted. The HR director had stopped making eye contact last week. VP had skipped their one-on-one 3 times in a row. And the CTO had recently posted a LinkedIn article about streamlining legacy roles for agile growth, which is corporates for someone's getting canned. She walked past her own desk that morning without realizing it, because it didn't look like her desk anymore. Her family photo was gone, replaced by a stack of manila folders and someone else's half-drunk Starbucks. She stopped, blinked, took a single step back. Just as the janitor came by, pushing his cart with a sympathetic grimace. You're early, he mumbled, eyes down. I always am, she replied, quietly. That's when Joe, the old waiter, stepped through the office doors, something he'd never done before. He looked around nervously, then spotted her and shuffled over, his hand shaking as he grabbed her wrist. Don't go in today, he whispered, breath warm with coffee and fear. Trust me. Elizabeth stared at him. That was the moment her world started to tilt. Elizabeth wanted to laugh. She really did. Joe, the 70-something waiter who barely remembered cream versus oat milk, was now giving her cryptic spy movie warnings at 8:07 in the morning. Rain slid off his plastic poncho in miserable little rivulets, and his eyes, normally cloudy with sleep and resignation, were glass clear. Alert, afraid. Joe, what? She asked, stepping back. His grip on her wrist was fragile, but firm. He looked around like someone might be watching. No explanation, no smile, just don't go in today, trust me. And here's the part she still replays like some scene from a bad thriller. She listened. She didn't badge in. She didn't question him further. She just slowly turned, walked back to her car under a gray sky fat with rain, sat in the driver's seat, and stared through the wipers as they tried and failed to clear her windshield of whatever the hell was happening. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the kind of deep, buried intuition that women in corporate jobs learn to grow like a second spine. But something in Joe's voice cracked open a part of her that had already been vibrating with dread. She didn't even pull out her phone right away. She just watched. From across the street, she had a perfect line of sight to her building. 4th floor, corner window, her office, one she'd earned. The one she bled weekends and missed weddings for. The one where she'd patched together prototypes with blistered fingers and saved 2 failed launches with nothing but duct tape and desperation. At 8:16, the building lights flickered on. At 8:17, a white Honda Civic pulled into the reserved parking lot. Jennifer, junior dev turned team strategy coordinator, which was basically a glorified title for a PowerPoint parrot, been assigned to shadow Elizabeth for 6 months. Mostly took notes, always complimented her shoes. At 8:18, Daniel stepped out of a BMW. Her old intern, recently promoted, wore blazers with elbow patches like some kind of tech professor cosplay. He'd once called her the closest thing I've had to a mentor, which was touching back when she thought it meant something. At 8:19, the final blow, Bryce, smiling, holding a briefcase like it was an Oscar. Elizabeth had spent 3 Thanksgivings helping him hit deadlines. He once cried in her office after missing his kids' science fair because of a failed deploy. She covered for him, lied to their director, told them it was her mistake, and now he was here in her parking spot, walking toward her office like he owned it, and trailing behind them, HR, 3 black folders. You can always spot them from a distance. Carry that unique corporate scent, performance reviews, exit packages, and euphemisms. Elizabeth's stomach flipped. She watched as they entered the building, chatting like it was any other Thursday. No one looked back. No one hesitated. They knew she wasn't there. That was the part that chilled her blood. They knew. She finally picked up her phone. No new messages, no calls, no calendar invites. Her badge hadn't been deactivated, yet. She tapped into the security portal, an admin shortcut she still had from her prototype integration days. No one ever remembered to revoke access when roles shifted. She watched the log light up. 8:21 a.m., Bryce Thomas, guest access granted, floor 4, 8:22 a.m., Jennifer Collins, active employee, floor 4, 8:23 a.m., Daniel Kaplan, active employee, floor 4, no badge ping for Elizabeth Mason. No log. No trace. As if she no longer existed. She sat there, motionless, as the rain thickened to sheets. Her coffee, Joe's last delivery, went cold in the cup holder. Across the street, someone closed the blinds in her office. Just like that, she was erased. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was a coup, and it had been in motion long before this morning. Elizabeth didn't remember driving home. The rain followed her like a funeral procession, smearing her windshield in gray streaks as she coasted down familiar roads with unfamiliar numbness. She didn't turn on music, didn't call anyone. She just gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles and stared ahead, her breath fogging up the interior in slow, angry bursts. She parked crooked in her driveway, left the engine running. Only when the automated garage light flicked off behind her did she realize she'd been sitting there for 10 minutes, blinking at her porch like it belonged to someone else. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, not really, but from the sick realization that everything she'd built was already being dismantled with surgical precision. She marched inside, dripping, bypassed her coat, her shoes, the pile of unopened mail, and went straight for the laptop in the kitchen drawer, the one not connected to the company's remote network. She hadn't used it in months. But today, she didn't want any IT admins seeing what she was about to dig through. The first thing she did was log into her personal email and check her legal folder. She'd made a habit of forwarding herself clean copies of everything over the years, mostly for her own sanity. Meeting notes, version logs, even drafts of patent filings. A breadcrumb trail of a life lived in back-end architecture and version control. And there it was, forwarded draft from 6 weeks ago. Preliminary IPO roadshow deck internal eyes only. She opened it. Slide 6, Technology Pillars Slide 7, Key Innovations R&D Overview Slide 8, Team-led advancements in AI-driven infrastructure. There it was. A clean list of innovations that, if she lined up the original lab notebooks, were hers. Her diagrams, her models, her problem solve at 3 a.m. after that vendor botched the implementation. In place of her name, just the team. She stared at it for a long time, jaw clenched, breath shallow, and then she clicked into the Properties tab buried deep in the metadata. Last edit, Daniel Kaplan drafted by, Jennifer Collins approved by, Bryce Thomas of course. She opened the legal archive next. Password protected, encrypted, but not beyond her. A few bypasses later, thanks to an old credentials loophole she'd never reported, and she was in. She went back to the filing from 3 years ago, the backbone patent, the one she was most proud of. The clause was buried under exhibits and addenda, nestled in the licensing section. Written in legalese, so dry it might as well have been dust, but the lines stopped her cold. Patent ownership may be reassigned following expiration of internal non-compete, provided proper notice is filed through appropriate holding entities. Her eyes widened. She checked the date. The clause's restriction period had expired exactly 14 days ago. Her heart thudded like it was trying to escape her chest. They hadn't just erased her. They timed it, waited until she couldn't claw back attribution, until she was just one more ex-employee with no legal footing. Except they miscalculated. The clause didn't require company permission. It just required the rights holder to file the transfer properly, which she hadn't done. Yet, Elizabeth exhaled sharply. It wasn't over. She still had a move left. But it had to be fast, quiet, surgical. She glanced at the clock, 10:13 a.m. They were probably in her office right now, pretending not to notice the photo frame had been moved, the chair still warm. She closed the laptop, and then opened a different one, the one with her personal legal contacts. Her college roommate, now a corporate attorney in Delaware, hadn't spoken to her in over a year. But she remembered the last text she'd sent. If you ever need to bury someone in paperwork, you know who to call. Elizabeth cracked her neck, dialed the number, and said calmly, "Hey, Emily. I've got a patent transfer I need to execute, fast." There was a pause on the line. Then, "Whose name are we erasing?" Elizabeth smiled thinly. "Mine." Elizabeth didn't sleep. Not even a nap on the couch between calls. Adrenaline burned so hot it could have powered half the eastern seaboard. She moved like a machine, fast, precise, unstoppable. Somewhere in her subconscious, the betrayal had already sunk its teeth in, but she wasn't ready to bleed just yet. Not when the knives were still on the table. Emily, her corporate law bulldog with a silk voice, didn't ask questions, just started typing. By midnight, they had the LLC registered in Delaware. Clean, anonymous, airtight. Name, Alira Holdings. A meaningless word, scrubbed from any trace that could tie it to Elizabeth Mason. The filings moved like grease through a pipeline. Emily's firm had done this dance for hedge funds and failed tech startups, but never with a time bomb strapped to the patent docket. Every transfer required precision. Signature, timestamp, chain of custody. Elizabeth sent her original contributor notes, the early diagrams, the drafts that never made it into official files, ones she'd created at home, on her own time, on her own machines, with her own name. By 3:43 a.m., the official transfer of her intellectual property, 6 patent clusters tied directly to the company's upcoming IPO, was legally reassigned from her name to Alira Holdings, a new entity, a new gatekeeper, one they didn't even know existed. The company still thought it owned her work. They were polishing slide decks, wooing investors, celebrating the streamlining of a redundant R&D contributor. Meanwhile, the very tech they were about to pitch now required licensing through a company they'd never heard of. That was Move 1. Move 2 came just before dawn, when Elizabeth sent a carefully worded email, through her private inbox, to the VP of Innovation at Vertex Innovations, their fiercest competitor. The ones her company had mocked during quarterly reviews as yesterday's tech, wrapped in buzzwords. Subject line, possible consulting alignment, time sensitive. Inside, she attached a short file, a portfolio overview of her reassigned patents, stripped of any identifying metadata, along with a note, interested in discussing forward-thinking IP strategies. Confidentially, I'm available today. She hit send at 4:27 a.m. At 5:02 a.m., her phone rang. The voice on the other end was smooth, intrigued, and direct. "Been watching your company's filings for months," he said. "Didn't expect this. You're behind the modular AI framework, aren't you?" "I am," Elizabeth replied flatly. "And as of this morning, it's available, but not to them." A brief pause. "How soon can we make this official? I can sign before breakfast." And she did. By 6:18 a.m., Elizabeth had a signed consulting agreement sitting in her inbox, one with a lucrative base retainer, stock options, and a confidentiality clause so thick it could choke a whale. Vertex didn't want to make noise. Not yet, but when the time came, they'd roll out her announcement with fireworks. Elizabeth sat back in her chair, finally exhaling, muscles twitching with exhaustion and rage. That's when the email arrived, from a name she hadn't seen in 2 years. Gerald Morton, former board member. Old school, no BS type, kind who used to walk into R&D with coffee for the whole floor. He'd always liked her, called her the quiet flamethrower. Subject, what are you cooking? The message was just one line. Funny, saw your name pop up on a different team's radar. Always knew you'd light something on fire someday. Elizabeth stared at the screen, then closed the lid. Fire? Oh, she wasn't done yet. She just struck the match. The call came at 9:14 a.m. sharp, just after the morning all-hands meeting she used to lead with 2 coffees and a headache. Her phone buzzed against the kitchen table as she stirred her 5th cup of instant, hand wrapped in a heating pad from typing all night. The screen flashed a familiar number, HR. Elizabeth let it ring twice before answering, not because she was nervous. She just wanted the woman on the other end to sweat. Hi, Elizabeth. This is Carol from People Operations. Just following up. Looks like you weren't on site yesterday or this morning. The CTO asked if we could go ahead and schedule an exit interview. Carol's voice had the dead sparkle of someone reading from a script while Googling cruise vacations. Elizabeth could practically hear the pastel power suit through the phone. She smiled to herself, leaned against the counter, and replied with all the warmth of a granite countertop. I'll have representation present. A pause. I'm sorry, could you clarify? Elizabeth's smile widened, and she said, calmly, you heard me. Before Carol could stammer out a follow-up, Elizabeth tapped the screen and ended the call. Then, without blinking, she blocked the number. She didn't need their paperwork. She didn't need their folder full of opportunities for growth. They thought they were managing her out, cleaning house, getting their ducks in a row before the IPO spotlight came down. They didn't realize the spotlight was about to melt them alive. Upstairs, in a box tucked behind her filing cabinet, Elizabeth found her old badge. The one with her photo laminated in a crooked square, the one she'd worn like armor through 7 years of late nights, gaslighting, and quietly rewarded credit. She slipped it into a padded envelope. No note, just a yellow post-it stuck on the back. 3 words, hand-scrawled in her favorite black gel pen, check the filing date. She dropped it in the mailbox that afternoon with a little grin. Didn't even bother tracking it. Let them find it in the Monday morning mail pile between corporate pizza coupons and bulk order toner receipts. Let Bryce open it with his smug little smirk, expecting some resignation speech or weak apology. Instead, he'd find the beginning of his nightmare. By evening, she'd heard nothing. No texts, no calls, not even a cowardly email. Still thought she was in the fetal position on her couch, binge-watching job board alerts and crying into old team photos. Perfect. They had no idea she'd already moved to the other side of the chessboard. She was technically still employed. Her digital footprint hadn't been scrubbed yet. Her Slack account was inactive, but not deactivated. And while she couldn't access the R&D channel, she could still see the public ones, #IP updates, #launch 2025, #branding. So she watched, quietly, like a sniper in a ghillie suit. That night, a junior dev posted a gif of champagne bottles popping in #IP updates. The caption, 1 week to go. Elizabeth stared at the gif, popping corks, animated confetti. Ignorance. She clicked into the investor landing page they were prepping, still protected by a password only a handful of execs had. But guess what? Nobody had changed the shared dev login from 6 months ago. She was in within seconds. The pitch deck hadn't changed. Still flaunting tech she built, ideas she mothered, systems she bled for. Her name was still absent. The patents listed under a generic umbrella of company-owned IP. No footnotes, no attribution. Just the soulless marketing spin of a team that thought theft was innovation. She closed the tab, exhaled slowly, and opened a new window, this one for Vertex's internal workspace. Her name sat at the top of the consultant dashboard. Underneath, IP Strategy Priority Consultant. Clearance, Executive. She didn't feel joy. Not yet, that would come later. Right now, all she felt was clarity. Let them think she was gone. Let them think she'd been erased, because the real erasure was coming. And this time, she held the pen. The day before the IPO, the office buzzed like a cracked beehive, frenzied, smug, vibrating with self-importance. Suits ran on caffeine and delusion. HR walked around like grief counselors who just helped someone find their next chapter. And Bryce gave interviews to actual press, posed in the executive lounge with that waxy, overcoached smile, bragging about a meaner R&D pipeline with fully secured IP. Somewhere, he even used the phrase intellectual vertical integration, like he knew what it meant. Elizabeth didn't need to see it. She'd already read the updated investor materials, publicly posted now in glossy PDF, with embarrassing typos and recycled buzzwords. But nestled right there on page 12, beneath the section titled Proprietary Technologies, were her babies. Diagrams lifted directly from her 2022 pitch decks. Names changed, flowcharts recolored, but it was her code skeleton, her framework, her signal logic, and under it, phrase wholly owned and developed in-house. Elizabeth sipped her tea at a glass conference table 47 floors above the Manhattan skyline. Not her old office. This one had real chairs, real power. Vertex's executive suite smelled like wealth and wood polish, not broken ambition and desperation. Across from her sat the CTO of Vertex, a woman who didn't blink when Elizabeth broke down how the tech worked, what its bottlenecks were, what it would cost them to replicate. The board members didn't smirk or posture. They listened, took notes, because they weren't just hiring her for consulting, they were preparing to inherit the future. She signed the final addendum at 11:12 a.m., retroactive to the filing date of her holding company. All her patents, now exclusively licensable through Vertex under her oversight. The irony? Her former company could still use the tech, just had to pay her to do it. And the clock on that bill started ticking tomorrow. Back across town, her old team was too busy popping champagne to notice the noose tightening. Bryce held a toast over catered shrimp. Jennifer cried when the CFO told her she'd be on the IPO Faces page of the website. Daniel uploaded a selfie with the caption, "From intern to innovator brainfire, #IPO day," and somewhere, in a sea of spreadsheets and stress pimples, junior analyst named Ravi Patel flagged something odd in a Slack thread. "Hey, has anyone reviewed the copyright chain on the AI framework slide? The metadata looks off. There's a filing discrepancy on one of the support patents. Might just be a date mismatch, but wanted to double-check." Silence. Then a response 20 minutes later from someone in legal. "We're good. Cleared by Corp. Focus on the queue and a packet." Ravi didn't push. He was new, still wearing the same shoes from college, still hungry for a shot. He archived the message, closed the tab, told himself it wasn't his fight. But Elizabeth read the thread, because she still had shadow access to their Slack archive, thanks to a forgotten shared credentials file buried in their Confluence docs. Bryce had uploaded it last quarter, labeled it Do Not Delete. She leaned back in her chair, watching Ravi's comment blink into the ether. He tried. No one listened. Never do? That evening, she returned to her rented beach house and poured herself a single glass of red wine. No celebration. Not yet. The ocean wind slipped through the cracked window, carried salt and promise. On the counter, her phone buzzed with a new message from Gerald, the old board member. Just a gift this time. A matchstick, struck, flames rising. Elizabeth smiled. Tomorrow, the market would open. By the time the cameras flashed, and Bryce finished his empty little speech, the board would realize something awful. The crown jewel they thought they were selling was already leased, and they didn't own the landlord. They went live at 9:02 a.m. The stream flickered on with too much echo and not enough gravitas, a poorly lit stage, and 3 too-proud executives lined up in a row like they'd just solved climate change. Bryce stood center, flanked by Daniel and Jennifer like they were the apostles of innovation. The backdrop, a high-res rendering of the company's Next Horizon technology suite, which, of course, Elizabeth had architected in her garage before these idiots knew how to spell machine learning. Investors tuned in from New York, San Francisco, Singapore. The chat scrolled fast, comments flying. Solid pipeline, interesting tech, who's the IP contact? Most of the audience didn't know what they were looking at, but the energy was bullish. The CFO gave his speech. The head of operations droned on about streamlined optimization across core sectors. Jennifer spoke with too much throat clearing, reading from cue cards like she was hoping not to pass out. Then it was Bryce's turn. He paced a little, palms open, confident like a man standing on a cliff who hadn't yet looked down. At the heart of our upcoming innovations, he began, is a proprietary AI architecture that allows for seamless deployment, faster processing, and scalable applications across a wide variety of industries, from education to defense to logistics. He smiled. And the best part, we own it. Fully. In-house. All protected under our patent portfolio. He gestured to the screen behind him. Let me walk you through some of our leading minds, our IP strategists who made this possible. The screen changed. Jennifer's photo, Daniel's, two others, then mid-slide, a flicker. A stutter, the slide stalled, and then slowly a new image filled the screen. Higher resolution. Centered, unmistakable. Elizabeth Mason, her name in bold, below it. Lead consultant Vertex Innovations, the logo pulsed clean in the corner. Vertex. Not their company, not the people standing on stage, not the ticker they'd spent the last 6 months hyping. Bryce froze, mid-sentence, his jaw tensed. The camera caught the moment, his pupils dilating, the faint twitch at the corner of his mouth. The chat lit up. Wait, is that her? Vertex? Did she defect? What's going on? IP transfer? The CFO stood up from the audience, yanked his phone out like it might detonate. Jennifer dropped her mic. Daniel leaned toward the tech crew, whispering like a man begging a priest to undo communion. Then someone from legal, Karen, Elizabeth thought her name was, stood and walked briskly out of the frame, already dialing. Behind the curtain, the wheels were coming off. Phone calls flew. The live chat flooded with question marks and warning emojis. Half the audience had screenshotted the moment already. It hit Twitter within 60 seconds. The slide vanished from the stream, replaced by a technical difficulties banner. But it was too late. The world had seen it. Elizabeth Mason wasn't a ghost. She was the storm. And while her old team was imploding under fluorescent lights and bad coffee breath, she sat barefoot on the porch of her beach rental, coffee in hand, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like sea salt and quiet rage. The sun crept up lazily over the water. Her phone buzzed once. She looked down. It was from Joe. The old waiter. Just 3 words. They deserved it. She smiled without teeth, then turned off the stream. The best part, she hadn't lifted a finger. They'd handed her the match. She just let the whole damn thing burn. By noon, the stock ticker countdown vanished from the company homepage, replaced by a polite, vaguely threatening message from investor relations. Due to unforeseen legal considerations, our IPO launch is being rescheduled. We appreciate your patience. Unforeseen. That was one word for it. Investors began yanking capital faster than you could say material misrepresentation. 3 major funds dropped out within hours. 2 analysts updated their forecast from strong buy to proceed with caution, which in Wall Street terms was the equivalent of lighting a dumpster on fire and wheeling it into the lobby. Elizabeth had been watching it unfold on a private Discord with a few quiet allies in the industry. The memes came fast. Bryce's face photoshopped on the Titanic, Daniel's elbow patches floating on driftwood, a screen grab of Jennifer's shocked expression under the caption, "When your IPO turns into a FOH, FKR Holdings." She didn't laugh, not really. It didn't feel like comedy. It felt like justice at room temperature. Back at headquarters, Bryce locked himself in the executive conference room, trying to salvage what was left. Their legal team scrambled to re-examine the filings. By mid-afternoon, someone in compliance finally said the words no one wanted to hear. "We don't own this tech." That's when the audit committee stepped in. The patents, those gleaming diamonds they built their valuation on, were now held in a private Delaware entity with exclusive licensing rights granted to a competitor, which meant the company couldn't sell, couldn't scale, couldn't even demo the tech without risking a legal injunction. And that entity? Alira Holdings, controlled by a woman whose name they'd tried to scrub out of history like a coffee stain on a white rug. Elizabeth didn't gloat, not out loud. She didn't call old coworkers or post cryptic tweets. She didn't even text Gerald back when he sent her an all-caps message that just said, "You just dropped a nuke." Instead, she opened her banking app and wired $50,000 to an account labeled Joseph Carmichael. The note simply read, "For the truth." She doubted Joe would even know how to check it, let alone spend it. But someone at the bank would explain it to him. Maybe he'd buy a little house down near the coast. Maybe he'd just stop working. Maybe he'd finally take that trip he mentioned once during a rainstorm when they were both tired and pretending coffee could fix things. Later that night, her phone rang. A number she hadn't seen in 5 years. Doug Thorne, her old mentor, man who once told her that silence in meetings was power, who pulled her into secret projects and promised, "You'll get your recognition when it counts." Except he vanished the moment Bryce took over, stopped replying to emails, skipped her promotion review, Let her contributions be absorbed into the team like blood into a white shirt. She let the phone ring. Twice. 3 times. Then she declined it. He had nothing left to say to men who only remembered her name when the house caught fire. Doug left a voicemail. His voice had that same smug drawl, now dipped in desperation. "Elizabeth, it's Doug. Listen, look, we didn't know about the transfer, okay? There's panic over here. Legal's asking about licensing terms. Bryce is barely holding on. The board wants options. If you're willing to, talk about a resolution, I can." She deleted the message and closed her laptop. Out on the porch, the waves rolled in and rolled out. The sky was clean again, pink and blue bleeding into each other like a soft apology. She sipped her wine, barefoot, free. She wasn't angry anymore, just clean. They'd taken everything they could, and in return she gave them exactly what they deserved. The ballroom was packed. Tech executives, startup founders, journalists hunting for the next unicorn, every seat taken, every camera lens trained on the curved stage, backed by a massive LED screen that shimmered with abstract light patterns and buzzwords. Vertex Innovation Summit Shaping the Future. It sounded like every other tech conference, and in most years, it probably would have been. But this one had gravity, because for the first time since the IPO implosion, someone was about to speak publicly. Not from the disgraced company, the one that caught the falling crown before it hit the pavement. Vertex's CEO, a woman with steel gray eyes and no tolerance for bullshit, gave a short intro. She didn't name names, didn't mention lawsuits or filings or non-compete violations. She just said, "We've spent the last year ensuring the future of modular AI isn't just theoretical, it's operational. And the architect behind that future is someone you already know, or should have known." She stepped aside, and Elizabeth walked out. No PowerPoint, no dancing holograms, no applause sign. Just a woman in tailored black, sleeves rolled to her elbows, heels clicking with the rhythm of certainty. They clapped anyway, not polite, uncertain applause. Applause like recognition finally catching up. She stood center stage and waited. A second. Then 2. When it was quiet enough to hear someone shift in their seat, she leaned toward the mic and said calmly, "Real innovation has fingerprints. Mine are protected. No smile, no dramatics, just fact, weighted, irrefutable." Behind her, the screen shifted, 6 patent families displayed like constellations, each labeled, each tied to foundational systems in everything from autonomous logistics to adaptive learning platforms. A simple caption ran beneath them, licensed exclusively through Alira Holdings. In that moment, it became clear to everyone watching, whether in that ballroom or on the live stream watched by 50,000 at home, that the future would run through her gate. That any company wanting to play with the toys she invented would have to knock on her door and pay for the privilege. The headlines came fast. The woman who killed an IPO, Elizabeth Mason, rewrites R&D power structures, how one engineer became a licensing empire. And somewhere, probably at a sad wooden table under fluorescent lights, Bryce was trying to figure out how to spin it to the board. Jennifer was updating her LinkedIn to open to work. Daniel was back in a junior role, hiding under the same hoodie he once bragged in. Doug never called again. The company that erased her was now licensing her work to stay solvent. And Elizabeth, she wasn't interested in revenge. Revenge is loud, sloppy, temporary. This was something else. This was precision. This was architecture. She didn't step off stage immediately. She let the lights hold her for one more breath. Then she closed the moment with one final line, soft, but heard in every corner of the room. "Next time someone tries to erase you, make sure you already rewrote the script." You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.